Once you crossed over to the Bitcoin hole, it's literally a blue ocean of opportunity, right? But do not come into Bitcoin thinking, oh, I need to find a Bitcoin job. Create it for yourself.
Yeah.
Create it for yourself. If you're smart enough to be in Bitcoin in 2025, you're a smart dude or gal, and you have skills that you can offer. So don't go where like, oh, look at the True North guys are doing this, that, and that. Just go your way. And inevitably, you're going to attract the right people. Just go put yourself out there. Don't think that you don't have anything good to say. You're a Bitcoiner in 2025. You got here with your own unique route. And in a world of AI, authenticity is the rarest commodity. If you studied history as well, whoever owns the most amount of hardest financial asset will help rewrite the history of tomorrow.
Especially as men, we do need a mission.
Yes.
We need something that kind of drives us beyond our comfort zones, and I think it can be dangerous for Bitcoiners to just sit on their stack and say, I really don't need to work. And say, yeah, it's true, you might not need to work, but you need a purpose, you need a mission to bring out the best in you, something that makes you struggle and strive. I think more Bitcoiners would be better served, at least their emotional health, if they were more focused on building than combating this old world.
The system is broken. Inflation is robbing your wealth. Banks control your money. But what if there was a way out? Bitcoin isn't just an asset, it's a revolution, a decentralized, unstoppable financial system built for the people, by the people. This is the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, your front row seat to the future of money. No hype, no noise, just real Bitcoin insights from the industry's top voices. Bitcoin isn't the future, it's happening now. And if you're not paying attention, you're already behind. Don't just watch from the sidelines. Be part of the Bitcoin revolution. Subscribe now to the Daily Bitcoin Podcast.
Okay, we are live against Craig Leblanc, the doorman with the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, with guest Peter. How do you spell your last name? Duan?
Duan. Perfect.
Fine. Okay. Yeah, we were talking about how committed we are to Bitcoin, and I was just getting ready to tell him that after selling everything I possibly own and not nailed down and throw it into Bitcoin, I finally got to that point to where I'm considering borrowing money to buy more Bitcoin to get dollars and then buy more Bitcoin with those dollars, and to just keep doing the Michael Saylor strategy. And I don't know. That's where I'm at right now. How about yourself?
So I had a couple guys on my live spaces. They like to leverage 0% interest credit cards.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting, right? I mean, it's not free money in the regards that obviously you have to repay it back. But also, if you were to move an existing credit card balance over to this card, it's a 3% fee. But the thing is that, as we know, as Bitcoiners, our Bitcoin goes up over time, while fiat goes down over time. So these guys are really smart, and a shout out to Hermes Lux and Sunny Poe. They can definitely try to find that on Twitter. So they would open up these, and then they will roll them, through like the family, the mom, their wives. And so, these periods are between 15 months to 21 months. So if you roll it 4 times, you're getting 6 years worth of Bitcoin purchase, while it's getting denominated, at 0% interest. So that's one way to play it. And then there's other ways to play it as well.
Yeah. And I think I was listening to Lavish, I think a couple of days ago, and he was saying he got in when it was around 300 a coin, but his conviction was so low, he just was not committed. And that's where I was. I came in around 2017, did some shit coining for a while, but then today my conviction is about as high as it can get. And so
if you're over 100% Bitcoin, right, you're getting margin, or you're borrowing cash to buy Bitcoin. I mean, it is as strong a conviction as it gets.
Well, I had that lingering nugget of wisdom I picked up from some wealth building books a long time ago, that the wealthy got wealthy because they bought assets and borrowed against them and never sold the asset. So I always kind of knew that, but I guess my conviction wasn't so secure into what Bitcoin was until after. Oh my gosh. Well, I did a Bitcoin podcast, which I'm glad to hear you did live spaces, or you still do those on X?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did a daily show for 2 hours a day from 7 to 9 a.m. For a year straight without missing one single day.
Wow.
And that's how I learned about Bitcoin, actually. I was like, the best way to learn about it is to just start a podcast on it.
That's amazing.
And
That's amazing.
well, we would have people come up to the stage and ask questions about Bitcoin, and I would give the most horrible pre-K answer that a new Bitcoin guy would give, and the OG Bitcoiners in the audience could not help but come and correct me, because I was like, "Guys, y'all correct me if I'm wrong," and they would come up the stage and just like, bleed all over my third grade essay.
No, but that's a beautiful part about Bitcoiners, right? Is we're all on the same team.
Right.
So if we were to help each other learn and ultimately orange pill others, it only helps us at the end of the day. So that's why it's such a magnificent team.
Yeah. Maybe speak about that a little bit. I don't think people understand that we are all on the same team. When one of us wins, we all win, versus, you have to lose for me to win in this kind of capitalist society.
Yeah, well, I presume most of you who are listening to this are Bitcoiners, so you definitely know about the $21 million cap.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're at this very interesting confluence in time where there are institutions that are buying up capital, buying up Bitcoin like crazy. I'm not talking about, the traditional ones, like Morgan Stanley or some of the others, but I'm talking about more like new companies like Strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all these other Bitcoin treasury companies. So that's one side. And then, yes, slowly but surely, Wall Street is dabbling their toes in it. So you have BlackRock and Fidelity, the number 1 and number 3 largest asset manager in the world, actively going out to the professionals who would then obviously sell it to their clients. And then we also, in this cycle, are getting sovereign wealth. So really, when you have, that's the beauty of Bitcoin, is that hard 21 million cap. And if you're telling people, about the merits of Bitcoin, well, inevitably that will trickle down to higher Bitcoin prices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that rule of life that I've learned, that money flows to where it's treated with the most respect. I'm like, that's just like a gravity well that's slowly attracting the smart money as they wake up to it. And God, why does it take so long to wake up to Bitcoin?
Well,
why did it take 7 years? That's what I want to know.
That's a good question. And so just for the audience who don't know who I am, I don't expect you to know who I am. I've been in TradFi for 14 years, and I got to see it from so many different perspectives within TradFi. So I actually started off at Cantor Fitzgerald's CMBS division, and then I moved over to a non-traded REIT company doing fundraising. I worked at investor relations at an S&P 500 company. I had my own online investment coaching business, and most recently I was a wealth advisor. So I tell you all that because, as I said, it gives me a nice depth and breadth of different experiences and how they would view Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
So the last place I was at was a wealth management firm. Those people are the least likely to adopt Bitcoin, simply because the average client you meet once or twice, and maybe once a quarter, a year, if it's a good enough client. And if Bitcoin is a de minimis, I'm talking about less than 5% allocation to your portfolio, yet it is by far the most volatile, and it takes up as much oxygen as every other asset in your portfolio. You're not going to, as a wealth advisor, you're not going to want to do that, right? And also, as a wealth advisor, you think about incentives as well. If you talk about Bitcoin to your clients and they start realizing that on a risk-adjusted basis, it poops on every other asset class, then if it's a smart enough client, they'll just move all their assets to Bitcoin.
Right.
Yeah. So incentives are important.
Yeah. And I wonder, maybe it's because they're doing so well in the current system, they're just losing slower than the rest of us, but comparatively they're doing fantastic. That just is like, I don't want to take the risk, the volatility. There seems to be some cognitive dissonance that they just cannot accept the new. It reminds me of the movie Matrix, where you just cannot, you think of Neo, and he just couldn't, his head was popping when he was trying to understand that his whole life was just a lie.
I love that analogy because besides like Christianity, which I'm a Christian, like that was kind of a hard moment. But for me, like Bitcoin, it took well over 100 hours to absorb and accept as truth. Bitcoin really is difficult in regards that it's a confluence of many different non-related areas. You have to learn about the history of money. You have to understand that our fiat is not backed by anything other than the faith and trust of the US government that we got off of the gold standard back in 1971. Then you have to understand the technology part. So even if you're financially savvy, you have to understand what blockchain is. Well, how does mining work? What is open source software? And so it's very easy to understand why it's so hard, especially if you're in the system. And I agree with your point. You got to think, the mass majority of people who are at these financial institutions are 45 years and older. Okay, so said another way, they have over 2 decades worth of experience being trained to think and execute in a certain manner. And this is, again, I want to tie it with what Saylor says. He says, you have to step back to where MicroStrategy was 5 years ago. It was a dying company, right? And if you're not incentivized to make that change, you're not going to do it. A perfect example of that is Microsoft had Bitcoin on its as one of the many items to vote on during the last earnings. Only 0.55% of people approved it because Microsoft is probably, it's a Magnificent Seven, right? It's probably the best company at this point. So again, it comes down to incentives. And are you really willing to spend 100+ hours to really denounce everything that you knew?
Yeah. Wow, you're a quick study, 100+ hours. I'm thinking like 1,000+ hours is where I got it. I was a slow learner.
At this point, I spent 1,500+ hours, but that first 100 hours kind of started clicking for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like it just kept piquing my curiosity. If not for my curiosity, I don't think I would have, because I was told I was a fool by, I think all Bitcoiners go through this. Even today, we're still kind of laughed off the conversation. People start rolling their eyes.
But you know what? Hence the opportunity, right? Because I don't know if it's Warren Buffett or some of these wise investors, they say, invert, always invert, right? Charlie Munger said that. So think it another way. If your barber starts talking to you about Bitcoin, then it's probably a local maximum. And that's when you can probably, if you want to sell your Bitcoin to get more Bitcoin, not recommended if you don't know anything about trading. But yeah, it's hence the opportunity. So if you're willing to eat the social society peer pressure, but you're laughing your way to the bank, then who cares?
Yeah. What do you think of the statement? I forget where this came from, but you can't understand a problem or you can't solve a problem from inside the system that caused the problem. And I think that's where people are trying to reason from within the system. And I think that's where people get stuck, is that it is completely outside this current system, the monetary system.
Yes, I agree with that. What's interesting is quite a few months ago, I saw a personality test of Bitcoiners, and it was a pretty big sample size, well over, I think, 500 people, maybe 1,000 people. So it's quite,
wow.
The data is quite rich. And I just remember, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I just remember it was disproportionately the people who are deeply analytical and don't take things at face value. So you talk about curiosity. I too am someone who's curious and don't accept things for face value. So it is those people who disproportionately get to benefit. Now, if I may, I want to talk briefly about a thread that I posted about regarding this new era that we're entering.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
Yeah, which is about artificial intelligence. A lot of people still don't play around with it much. Matter of fact, right before our call, I was just watching a Stanford adjunct professor talk about that only about 10% of working professionals use AI on a day-to-day. Okay, so what that means is they're not aware of the capabilities that it has. And unfortunately, because of AI, it is going to collapse white-collar, knowledge-skilled workers to zero, or the price of $20 a month subscription to ChatGPT. Okay. So this is what, I don't know if you follow Josh Mandel. He became really famous a few months ago about his 84,000K prophecy. But he talks about the fourth turning. So the fourth turning is that every about 80 years, there is forced cycles, four turnings, if you will. And the fourth turning is a especially chaotic period. And again, it can be mapped to today. And some people can say, hey, after the financial crisis of 2008, 2009 was the beginning of the fourth turning. Okay. So right now, if you study history, and again, this is talking about why it's really important to understand financial history and political history. If you study history, if you're the world's largest reserve currency, which is US right now, and you're the largest economy, then the rest of the world wants to hold and own your currency. Okay. But if you quickly are supplanted by the second place, who is now the first place, so China in this instance, the percentage of the global reserve currency goes down. And you can already see that. Ray Dalio does a beautiful job of showing that. Okay? Yeah. So we're talking about geopolitical risk with mostly us and China, the number one and number two power. We're talking about international debt that is unsustainable, that our interest payment on our $36 trillion worth of debt is $2 trillion, which is greater than that of our defense budget. And then you have AI on top of that. So what I'm really, I pray to God that I'm wrong on this, is that we're entering an especially chaotic period. And besides the mega AI companies, I think it is the Bitcoin treasury companies who call it as the financial Noah's Ark that will survive in this era of severe debasement and chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually read that article. I was looking at your, at that post earlier today. And what do you think about the 250-year cycle of governments that seem to be, it seems like every 250 years you have a mass centralization of governance, and then it starts to decentralize. And you can see how, America, the founding of America was part of that it went from kings and queens centralizing, having all authority, and then the US really just sucked all the talent into the United States because it was a free governance. And I think we're at the end of that cycle to where now the pendulum started to swing back in the other direction towards decentralization of governance.
Yes, there's going to be a decentralization of a lot of things. So Balaji, some people don't like him because he does crypto stuff. He was the first chief technology officer for Coinbase. He has since spun off, but he's known to be a big Bitcoiner. So I follow him, and he is creating decentralized societies where he's revolutionizing. Like if you have like a passport and you can go to some Asian countries, I think this was right off the coast of Singapore, they'll give you housing, they'll feed you real well, they'll give you the world-class facilities, and they'll pair you up. You have to do a round of interviews, right? The last round of interview is going into in person to do a standardized test, because that's something AI can't really, fake.
Right.
And then once you go through there, then you're effectively in this new type of decentralized technology incubator, where now you have some of the best and brightest minds from all parts of the world now leaning upon each other, leaning upon AI, and more importantly, well, not all more important, but equally as important, you have a network that is backed by someone like Balaji. So that is where we're going, at least on that front. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of people who are stuck. And because of the sophistication of Bitcoin, I don't know how many people can transition into this new world successfully.
What I see is I was in my, I drive a Tesla, of course, and thing drives itself now. It's amazing when you're driving around in a real world application of AI. And one of the charging stations in this town on the way up to Jasper, Alabama, is in a mall. And it seems like I go to that mall, to this little kiosk, and I buy a new iPhone case because they're super cheap. And you just see all the shops closing. And I'm just like, the physical world, it's just being exited. All things physical. And it's almost like we're becoming these digital citizens online, so that before you had to kind of move to America to have all the freedoms of an American. But now with Bitcoin, you can stay right where you're at and have more property rights and freedom than you ever had, even in the early days of America.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I think it's the venture capitalist at A16Z who says software is eating the world. However, I do see that there is slowly now, because of AI, a orientation towards advanced manufacturing. So I'm thinking about like the companies like Anduril, right, who are bringing high technological manufacturing here. Now, of course, that's not going to be enough to sustain the mass majority of people. I mean, for instance, I don't know if you know this. I found the statistic out, and it was very enlightening. For every one manufacturing job, that roughly produces 7 jobs locally in the economy. So this is why manufacturing is so important. And this is why you see the Rust Belt, because the manufacturing got outsourced abroad, and slowly that started hollowing out those types of locations. So I don't know. I don't know how this tariff war is going to play out. I did a thread on Scott Bessent, which is our Secretary of Treasury.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting because in order to understand a man, you have to understand his experience. And he learned under both George Soros and Jim Keynos. So Jim Keynos is it's a famous short seller, meaning shorting the stock, thinking that the stock will go down. And in order to be a very good short seller, you have to have pretty, pardon my French, but steel balls, because 7 out of 10 times the market goes up. And so if you're shorting it, you're borrowing to pay it back. So you have to be very deeply technical, and you're not afraid to ruffle feathers in pursuit of long-term profit. So that's Jim Keynos. The other side is George Soros. So I don't want to comment on his political stuff, but what he's known for is reflexivity, which means how things are perceived is going to be how it ends up. I think I'm butchering that statement a little bit, but there's feedback loops, right? So all that to be said is Besson, who is again our Secretary of Treasury, is not afraid to make dramatic movements and to anchor very aggressively in order to get results in the end.
Yeah. So it seems like, I remember when I saw Trump speak in the Nashville conference, he had so many times you could feel the audience cringe every time he said crypto. And we were all wondering, like, oh my gosh, is he just going to embrace all crypto? And then when David Sachs came on the All In podcast and started just peppering the entire podcast with Bitcoin, 21 million. I mean, you could tell he had a much deeper understanding with it. And then when Howard came out, the last few times, it's like, okay, I think these guys understand that at a deep level. You can tell by how somebody presents their understanding about Bitcoin. You can almost guess how many hours they're deep into it.
Yeah, I agree with that. But at the same time, he is pretty crypto friendly. I mean, you wouldn't launch not 1, but 2 meme coins if you didn't want to make a quick buck or a few billion bucks. So yeah, generally speaking, I was not a fan of that. But I do love David Sachs. I think I've heard, I don't know obviously how you can confirm this, but David Sachs sold a huge portion, if not all of his crypto holdings. And it's estimated that if Bitcoin's going to go where it's going to go, he's going to lose out on $1 billion. I truly think David Sachs is a patriot in that regard, because he doesn't need to do this. Of course, he gets to rub shoulders at the epicenter of the political world, that or else he wouldn't do it. But at the end of the day, he understands Bitcoin, which I appreciate.
Now, have you been studying, or what do you think about Jack Mallers and a couple of the other people he's partnering with for the 21? What was the name of his company? 21 something.
It's just called 21. Some people call it 21 Capital. So the 4 companies that Jack, I wrote a thread on this as well. So the 4 people that, 4 companies that are combining forces is Tether, SoftBank, Bitfinance, and one other. Oh, did I say Tether already? I don't know. But anyways.
Howard's company, wouldn't it?
Howard's company, Cantor Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Okay. So these are big 4 major institutions, right? And especially Tether. I think not many people understand how powerful Tether is. Tether is got one of the biggest. I mean, they're not publicly traded, so you don't really know until you dig for yourself. But they have one of the biggest Bitcoin balance sheets. Paulo is very savvy, very, very savvy. And the way I see it is, I'm afraid that Tether is going to be used as part of the US dollar hegemony, so that just like how the CIA would use like foreign assets and said, hey, it's foreign, it's this
Right.
gray area. I'm afraid Tether is going to be used like that. But nevertheless, of course, what's good for Tether is good for Bitcoin. So I don't want to go down the political route.
Right.
But it is a very strong collaboration. Now, the thing with Jack is Jack has been around the block for a long time, even though he looks like a child. He's 30 years old and he's been in Bitcoin for 10 years. Now, the only thing that I would say, and I'm sure his PR team is going to tell him very shortly, is that you cannot show up to Bloomberg in a t-shirt and messy jeans anymore. And yeah, because now he's at the institutional level. And if he needs to persuade institutional people, he needs to present him as such. But otherwise, of course, there's really no other better CEO in my mind.
Yeah, I've been following him, and actually, he was one of the guys. Now I almost exclusively buy on Strike, and I've been playing with Coinbase a little. I'm ashamed to say, but it's one of the few places that right now I found that will let you borrow against your Bitcoin. So just kind of toying with that a little, trying to understand it. What are your thoughts around borrowing against your Bitcoin to buy more Bitcoin and that kind of stuff?
So just like any leverage is very exciting on the way up and catastrophic on the way down, especially. So I personally, I'm just going to talk about my own thing. I would not do it. If I was, I would do margin on my MSTR. So that, my Bitcoin is in cold. I keep that thing on ice. I keep that thing on me. So we keep it strapped, right? But for MSTR, right, you can just have a normal brokerage account, and the margin interest are much, much better than probably what you're getting. I don't know what you're getting at Coinbase, but it's probably better. And obviously, I wouldn't do high leverage, right? I wouldn't do 50% margin. Probably do 10%. But listen, if you've been around since 2017, you're probably sitting on a good enough stack. So I think, greed. I don't agree greed is good. Biblically, it is the lust of money that gets us in trouble, but rather money is otherwise just a tool.
Now, I think that as people start to see that, Bitcoin is an accepted asset and banks start to be able to accept it as collateral, just like they would real estate or land, that, like anything else, if you've got a good idea, you put up some land, you get your money, you go with your business idea. And so I think as people understand Bitcoin, I think this is inevitable. But won't this contribute to the centralization of Bitcoin as far as, the custodians of it? And I kind of see that with the ETFs. It's like so much of it is, at least the store of value of it, is getting centralized.
That's inevitable. Again, if you study history, the smartest finance guys are going to get and retain the hardest financial assets possible. That is, I'm sure Satoshi, could not have predicted that in such a short amount of time. But this is a free market dynamic, and if you're an Austrian economics person, you're not going to fight this.
And so I've heard Jeff Booth pushing this out a lot, where he's saying if Bitcoin does not succeed as a means of exchange, it'll fail as a store of value. Any thoughts around that one?
That's funny you brought that up, because I brought that up with CJ on my last Spaces.
Yeah.
I currently disagree. Simply because gold has been used for a long time, right? And gold has been a store of value for 5,000 years. But as you and I know, the characteristics of Bitcoin are so much more superior than that of gold. So I currently don't see that, but I obviously respect the world of Jeff Booth, so I would love to investigate deeper.
Yeah, and that's I actually listened to a podcast of his, and then he recently did the one with Robert Breedlove. I've listened to it twice, and I think I'm going to listen to it another 5 or 6 more times, let it sink in, because he really does kind of. It's almost like he's on the tip of the spear as far as discovering how deep the rabbit hole goes. Bitcoin is, at least it humbles me intellectually. And just when I think I get it, I get these pieces of information that kind of say, God, I'm still warming up here.
What is the last piece of information that opened your eyes like that?
Well, that was the one. That was a big one. How I'm trying to understand how it fails as a store of value if it doesn't succeed as a means of exchange. And he does explain it several times, but still trying to wrestle with that one in my head. He also talks a lot about how AI, everything falls to the marginal cost of production. How much does it cost for a line of code to write a line of code? And to your point of it just consuming all pretty much intellectual efforts, then everything should be falling. And I think we come to this struggle between AI, what do they call it, creating a deflationary economy, and governments causing an inflationary economy, and they're just like on a tug of war. I don't know what that looks like. It seems like it's just causing it's going to cause massive chaos.
Yeah, I'm not excited for that. I believe a large percentage of the population is going to turn towards nihilism. A certain percentage that hopefully is ever increasing is going towards religion.
Mhm.
But in whatever fields, it's going to make people question the validity of what they own. What I'm really afraid of is the fact that, and despite the fact I love using ChatGPT, that is my number one AI platform that I use every day. I was very discouraged by when they started all of the Studio Ghibli cartoons because that's intellectual property. And so, and also Sam Altman kind of has a bit of history of doing this. When he approached Scarlett Johansson, who was part of that movie Her, which is an AI robot on the phone, he approached her to use her voice as one of the many voices in ChatGPT, and she said she respectfully declined. However, very recently he put out one tweet that says Her, and very shortly thereafter there was a voice that was eerily similar to hers. So what I'm afraid of is the collapse of intellectual property. And again, if you listen to, I personally think these people at the World Economic Forum are, they're pretty like evil. The guy who stepped down, Klaus Schwab, very, very famously said, "You will own nothing and you will like it."
Mhm.
And obviously, as Bitcoiners, that is the antithesis. That is the devil that we're talking about.
Yeah. And I see that too. I don't know I don't see an escape from that, because much like in the day, and I don't know how old you are, but I remember when Napster came out and everybody fought against it. And now it's just like, it's so hard to survive as a musician compared to what it used to be, because it's almost like as soon as you release a song, the whole world can copy it and send it. And so there's
Right.
no real way, or at least we haven't found a way to get paid, for every time your song gets played. And so I don't see how all intellectual property falls to that in that same framework.
So some people whisper about using blockchain technology and tokenization.
Mhm.
And if there is like all these, what they call foundational AI models, like ChatGPT, like Perplexity, like Claude, they have what's known as weights. So it's all these variables and how do they weight certain things to spit out a certain type of result. So I can theoretically presume that these guys are already sucking every bit of the internet constantly. Like it's already done in the history, and it's just all about these new ones that's coming in. So if there's a way to compensate people and track it via the blockchain and say, hey, I'm just making up some stuff. Oh, you use 2% of Studio Ghibli's content to create this image. Then there will be these fractional, I don't know if Bitcoin will be good for it, but like crypto or whatever, that will ultimately compensate the users at the end. I hope that is the case. Otherwise, yeah, it's pretty scary.
Yeah. I think, and I thought Elon Musk made a post recently, and actually, I think Jack Dorsey may have started that, and he just kind of retweeted it, that the world would be a more abundant place if we could get rid of intellectual property or something along those lines. Did you see that one?
I did not know.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to look it up because I don't want to misquote it. But yeah, something along those lines. Kind of like if this was an open source world, in other words, then humanity could, share all of its ideas and build upon other ideas. Similar to, I guess, how the printing press allowed, just a more decentralization of knowledge. And this is just that times infinity almost.
Yes, but the problem with that is, okay, if I were to use an analogy, 1.0 is Google search. You look up whatever you want to look up, and it spits out all these links that you can go investigate for yourself. Version 2.0 is ChatGPT, where they take it to the next step and synthesize that in a very understandable way that's tailored to you. But very shortly and currently, there is already working on agentic AI, which means you give it a task and they would do it to completion.
Mhm.
So in this environment, how do you expect to keep up? How do you expect to accrete value? This is why I Bitcoin, but this is like, that's why I send out almost like an apocalyptic thread today. Like, people need to get on this Noah's boat of Bitcoin ASAP, or else, yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, I think human created value is just losing market share at an alarming rate. I don't know how
Yeah, the worst part is what I talked about is 10% of office workers don't even use it. So they don't know what's coming.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now tell me a little bit about what you do. I was kind of reading a little bit about your, was it a company or an advisory firm or what? Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I haven't officially announced it. But, I quit my wealth management job in December of last year. So I just wanted to work in Bitcoin. And I was talking to some big firms, but those fell through. So it was just God's way of telling me, hey, like, kind of just do your own thing. And so I started off the year, I did a 30 for 30 challenge because the MSTR community was down bad. People were very depressed. And I was like, I don't want to fill my feed with a bunch of crap. I want to try to figure out a way to be positive and add value to the community. So I launched a 30 for 30 thing where I wrote a thread every day. Okay. Now, mass majority of those threads, I don't even think any of those threads went viral. But that built this muscle for me where every day I don't have a job. Through the grace of God and through Bitcoin, I don't need a job. But that's my, just like how you do a daily Bitcoin podcast, I do a daily thread. Now I take Sundays off for rest. But what I've quickly gathered is my style of writing and my simplicity of it is doing well. It's going viral. A lot of people think that you need to have a high follower count in order to do well. Follower count is just a vanity metric. It's almost a lagging indicator because you have to understand X is a what have you done for me lately platform, as opposed to, let's say, YouTube, where they will show videos that have been months in the making, right? So what you want to do is you want to create interesting, timely content in a digestible, fun way that's tailored towards your own style, and you present that to the community. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people say, oh, AI is so easy to create content. Okay, well, go ahead and create viral content, right? It's not easy. Matter of fact, well, if you try and you experiment and you show up every day, it's easy, right? So I write all my threads using the help of AI. AI writes about 60 to 7%, but the beauty of it is my editing. That still maintains my soul. And that's where I think society goes, is that we are co-creating with AI, and we're limited only to our imagination. So all that to be said is I think that as more and more Bitcoin companies, services, podcasts, whatever show up, they need help. They need help messaging it a lot. So let me show you something. Because I've done digital marketing for 5 years. I had my own online investment coaching business, as I told you earlier. Everything is a funnel from a marketing perspective. Okay. The top of the funnel is your social media, in this case, Twitter. But you have to understand, now we are bombarded with content all day, every day. So between me and you doing work together takes anywhere, and the statistics vary, but it says anywhere between 8 to 14 touches for me to win your trust and for you to do business with me. Okay.
Mhm.
So you got to bring them down your funnel each and every way very methodically. Okay. So for example, top of the funnel is a viral Twitter thread. Okay. Then the next funnel may be a newsletter. Okay. And for me, I'm thinking about this where I get about 1 or 2 threads a week that generate over 100,000 impressions.
Mhm.
So I want to help other Bitcoiners create viral content. So if I was to start a newsletter, I would say I won't send you a newsletter just to be another newsletter in your inbox. I will only send you a newsletter if this week I wrote something that gained over 100,000 impressions. And then I will systematically break it down so it helps you write better content or create better
Right.
content. And then within the newsletter, another step down is, hey, some people like to learn on their own, fine, but other people want to take, the pill to get the instant result. So I have marketing consulting, right? I call myself a fractional CMO. I've been in talks with several companies and actually done some things to help them create viral content. So at the end of the day, Bitcoiners are very logical people, but that comes at a detriment when you're starting a Bitcoin company because a lot of people are just focused on the product and service, which is just down here. But you really need to focus on this. Once you have a good, and by the way, there's a saying in Silicon Valley, right? If the first version of what you ship doesn't embarrass you, you ship too late. So
That's right.
a lot of people are iterating at this service and product level, not getting any feedback, not making any sales. So my service is I'm going to teach you how to build your following, how to ultimately push them down a sales funnel so that naturally they think of you when they want to buy some sort of Bitcoin related service.
Yeah. You know, after producing about 700 hours of live content for Bitcoin, I really found a passion for making content. And if I had to encourage Bitcoiners, I'm like, hey, go convert the non-Bitcoiners. We talk to each other too much. We end up in an echo chamber. So I went back to my old industry, and right now I'm creating the fastest growing podcast in parks and recreation, which is municipal government. And they are so far on the opposite end of the bookcase as Bitcoiners. And so my goal is to just introduce this population of about 350,000 people nationwide to Bitcoin. And I'm shocked at how open they are to it because they don't get any Bitcoin content at all. I mean, they're familiar with it a little, but I think especially on X, you can get in this echo chamber where you just think everybody's around Bitcoin. But there are so many industries that have no idea about it. And so I'd like to see more Bitcoiners creating content for non-Bitcoiners.
So that's amazing that you have such a large following in this other completely unrelated area. And my recommendation is how can you start creating content that piques their interest and siphons them off to this content, right?
Yeah.
And again, we talked about the top of funnel, which seems like it's a very productive top of funnel. But engage with your community and figure out what is, you may not bring up Bitcoin right away because that might turn them off, but it's like, whoa, what is some worries that you have right now? And inevitably, some people will be like, well, cost of everything's going up. It's like, oh, that's interesting, right? And then what else? Like, it's important to speak the language of whoever is listening to you. So if these are Parks and Recs people, use forestry analogies to bridge them. And the beautiful part is AI can be there to assist you as well.
Yeah. And I love how you said you have to almost be an interpreter because until you learn a foreign language, it's hard for you to communicate any wisdom you have in your native tongue to these people that don't speak that language. And I think like anything, any rabbit hole you go down, if you're not careful, you come back speaking a whole nother language. And when you come back to tell all your people about it, they're like, what language are you speaking? They just don't get it.
Right. Yeah. You got to be careful on who you talk to about stuff like this because it might be counterintuitive, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You have to come up with ways to help bridge the gap. And And now I'm producing 10 hours a week. Well, 10 1-hour shows for all the different Bitcoin community, and I've got different show hosts and stuff. Maybe
Wow.
even people can start thinking around building media companies, almost like I often say that I'm creating the ESPN. Like ESPN was created for sports, MTV was created for music, CNN for politics and news and stuff. How many other industries don't have their own network? Parks and Rec was one of them. And now it just gives me an opportunity to gain trust, and really serve these people. And of course, like every good Bitcoiner, we can't talk long without somehow finding a way to connect the conversation to Bitcoin. And
Exactly.
yeah,
My thing though is, at least this is for me, and this is at least from people I've admired and studied very deeply, is they go a a mile deep, right?
Mhm.
Like they will focus on one platform and iterate and figure out and A/B test things and see what really sticks, right? Like, trust me, it doesn't feel good. Like I would spend 3-4 hours on a thread and it flops. Doesn't feel good. But again, it's a muscle, right? I also like to go to the gym. I also remember when I was out of shape, and it took me 6 months to get myself back in shape. But it was the consistency of showing up and iterating and improving your technique that becomes very powerful. So again, it's not about, in my opinion, not about how many shows you do, but rather how many quality guests that you can bring and what is your differentiating factor. I actually
Mhm.
think, and the reason why I haven't posted my live spaces, which are all recorded, by the way, onto Facebook, is that I don't know what is my unique angle as a
Mhm.
Bitcoin, right? Now, if I was to go down the route of like, hey, if you're a Bitcoin company or Bitcoin product and I come in here and let's analyze it together, okay, that's interesting, right? That's a differentiator, right? But it's like, because there's always, I mean, there's always a need for great content for sure, right? But it's
Mhm.
like, how can you compete and get market share and ultimate eyeballs for what you want to do? And more importantly, some people do this well where they go to a big show and they get the eyeballs, but it's a flash in the pan because they have no way to siphon that energy into something tangible, which is,
Mhm.
again, in my opinion, getting an email, right? Social media can kick you off anytime. We hear horror stories of that, but an email address is still kind of the OG way to get in touch with people in case anything shuts down. So if
Mhm.
that's the case, then what is the product or like free lead magnet that will give someone that will get you their email, right?
Mhm. Now, how do you get a tight feedback loop in your world, as far as getting input so that you can iterate quickly from your market, from your clients?
I use AI a lot. I also have a group of people who I respect, and they're obviously respect me back, so that they're willing to give honest feedback. But more importantly than that is you just allow the data to speak for itself.
Right.
Mr. Beast, who is probably the most famous YouTuber, he's been in this YouTube game for well over a decade now, despite his young age.
Mhm.
He simply says, replace the word algorithm with audience. Oh, the algorithm didn't do well. Well, the audience didn't like it, unfortunately. And I'm sorry.
Love it.
Like, yeah, like I try to be a nice person, but it's just like, yes, some people need to wake up, right? It's like
Yep.
your stuff is not great if it's not, people are not liking it and sharing it. Okay. Like you can have an ego about it and be ineffective, or you can learn from it and be effective. What do you want to do? Right. So it's that at the end of the day, if it's not going viral, and have an Excel sheet and track your numbers, right? Like for me, if I get a thread that gets anything less than, I don't know, 10,000, 15,000 impressions, it failed in my mind. If it hit 50, okay, it's a good one. If it hit 100, okay, that's really good. And I have my own folder. So on those days when I feel bad, I look at and analyze what was the reason why these went viral. And also, if I'm up for it, I'm going to look at the ones that flopped and analyze why did it flop,
Yeah.
right? And so it's an
Yeah.
iterative process.
I love the fact that you're measuring. So many people, they perform without measuring. And, just being formerly in sports, we were constantly measuring our performance, our speed, our distance, everything. Almost like every single practice you're measuring. And then you get into this content creation game, and it's just like people are not even using the data.
No,
To kind of
no. And
to
it's
kind
kind of
of
funny because Bitcoiners are usually pretty data-driven people. Yet they just think like they can throw spaghetti on the wall and be like, well, why aren't I growing as fast? Right? It's like you got to figure out your voice. You got to figure out your voice and why are people coming to you, right? And if you cannot articulate why are people following you and sharing your stuff, then you need to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah. Now, are you playing around with Nostr or any Damus or any of those?
No, I like to go a mile deep into something. So I was originally going to span out into LinkedIn, the orange pill normies, but I don't know if I want to waste that energy. I like hanging out with Bitcoiners. I like to help Bitcoiners. I don't want to like persuade people who are angry at me that I'm trying to push a Ponzi. Like I don't know. I haven't decided yet, but yeah, right now just focus on Twitter.
Yeah, I've gone off the deep end in LinkedIn, but fortunately or unfortunately, this is where almost all of my Parks and Rec community is from a business standpoint.
Okay.
We were big on Facebook, but most people are going there to socialize, where people on LinkedIn are there kind of to do business. So it's where I was able to grow my community on, at least on the Parks and Rec side. Really, I'm just trying to serve them and be maybe just that one Bitcoin guy in a sea of non-Bitcoin people planting seeds so that we can kind of normalize it. And then Dom Bay and a couple other people are actually helping me to find the few cities that are starting to hold Bitcoin. And then I'm going to make sure to lift them up and say, here's a good example of a city, of a municipal government that's holding Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. Of the 12,000 cities in America, there's going to be like some first movers. And so hopefully I can just shine a light on them to kind of normalize Bitcoin at that level.
I think that's a great start. I like to say, so, I only have about a bit over 15,000 followers. So it's not nothing, but it's also not massive, right? But the way I was able to create these content earlier on and to get it shared is that I focused on, I call it creating waves and writing them, right? Creating waves for other people that are doing cool things. And then I'm just talking about it, right? And as a result of, like, for example, I wrote one about Lynn Alden, and she was on Jack Farley's podcast, right? I was watching it anyways. I was just like, hey, let me break it down. It got over 1.1 million impressions. She herself reposted. So what I'm trying to say is that if you're trying to grow, leverage other people's stuff, but do it in a very sophisticated way, right? It's not like, hey, like, can you follow me back? Can you retweet me? No, it's like, hey, I'm adding value to you, and you get to also learn about other people's characters as well. So for example, I won't name the name, but I wrote a very viral thread, and that person, and I simply asked, hey, at the end, I would love for you to follow me back. I'm a big fan. But don't worry if you don't, right? He didn't follow me back. So that's okay. That's okay. Because, you shouldn't go into things expecting things. But I also know that, like, that's his kind of like character. So I wouldn't want to work with him as well. You know what I'm saying? So everything's a data point. But if you're looking to like grow, like, leverage other people who are tangentially related to you and where you want to take them, and borrow their influence by adding value to them.
Now, where did you get your marketing? I don't want to say efforts, but it seems like coming out of wealth management into marketing, those industries seem different. So where did that come from?
Yeah. So as I talked about earlier, I had my own investment coaching business. So this was around COVID time. I kind of had a quarter life crisis. I was in a 5-year relationship that ended. I hated my investor relations job at the S&P 500 company. So I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm gonna go travel the world because I'm not going to like regret traveling in my late 20s, early 30s, right? But along the way, I thought I saw other people who were working online. This is before remote working was like ubiquitous, right? But there's already this movement of what they call digital nomads. But I didn't want to work for somebody. I wanted, like, originally I wanted to go to MBA, but to get an MBA. But I was like, I didn't get this. I would have gotten into like a good school, but not like the top schools that I wanted to go to. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just save that money and just like create my own MBA, right? And so just take a step back. I went to UCLA, but I studied environmental science. And when I graduated, I couldn't find a job. But long story short, I figured out I want to work in finance because I want to learn how to make money work for me. And so I taught myself finance up until that point. So probably 7 or 8 years worth of self-financial knowledge. And so I thought, well, what are some things that I have knowledge-wise that I can share with other people. So I thought of investment coaching. Okay. So I just try to find some service that I think I would use. For example, what investment coaching is let me talk about financial advisors, right? Financial advisors, they're not going to look at you unless you have at least $500,000. Nowadays, it's $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million, right? You have to have the assets for them to get the fees for them to justify their time. But there was a lot of people like me in the regards that they were making decent money. They can save anywhere between $1,000 to $3,000 a month, who are learning how to invest. So synthesizing all of my personal knowledge, I also teamed up with a girl I met in Vietnam. She went to Harvard for her master's in education. And so we've iterated 3 separate times on this course. So it became a good course. And that's how I learned about digital marketing. But the thing is that business actually didn't do well, simply because I know this, but I focused on the bottom part. I didn't focus on the top part. The top part is, how do you differentiate yourself? Because why would someone listen to me when you have the Graham Steffens of the world who have over 1 million followers, right? It's like I have to build and claw my way out of scratch. But for me, having gone that experience, know that experience, I now know, like, I learned my mistakes. I learned now, like, let the data show me what I'm doing well and doing poorly. And then I'm gonna just iterate from that, right? How zig where everyone else zags. See, I already start seeing people who are like touting themselves as like, oh, I will be a good Bitcoin treasury, analyst. I can help you put Bitcoin on your treasury. Well, you're a commodity. How do you speak your expertise well, right? There's only one, Ben Workman who got swept away as a CIO small right away, right? There's one Jeff Walton. I'm sure offers are flying at his face right now, right? And the True North guys probably have offers flying at their face. But True North is only like, what, 15 people, if that?
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, well, how do you create your own waves, right? And so it takes critical thinking, and it takes a willingness to stand out. Like, I also noticed that a lot of Bitcoiners, despite being super logical, are very emotional. So I see them, especially bigger accounts, who would get in these like rage battles with trolls, and they're just like, they're wasting their own oxygen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So as you get bigger, you got to like learn how to like keep that blinder on and not take every little offer off the table. I get offers, and I'm not going to lie that I get that many offers, but I get interest nibbles here and there, right? But just like, no, like until it absolutely makes 100% sense, I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're over here building the world we want to live in, because, I think we can waste so much energy focusing on fighting the world that we don't like versus we could be over here building the world that we want. And I was kind of one of those where I was so busy trying to persuade and convince. I'm like, you know what? I'm not good at fighting. I'm better at building. And so that's when I started building things. And I feel like I think more Bitcoiners would be better served, at least their emotional health, if they were more focused on building than combating this old world.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, excuse me. Once you crossed over to the Bitcoin hole, it's literally a blue ocean of opportunity, right? But do not come into Bitcoin thinking, oh, I need to find a Bitcoin job. Create it for yourself.
Yeah.
Create it for yourself. What is 100%. Your value add? And I promise, if you're smart enough to be in Bitcoin in 2025, you're a smart dude or gal, and you have skills that you can offer. So don't go where like, oh, look at the True North guys are doing this, that, and that. Just go your own way. And inevitably you're going to attract the right people.
Yeah. Now you had said you're a Christian. I am as well. I'm wondering why it seems to be so slow in something that it would seem like if I had to say this is God's money, it would be Bitcoin. I feel like Christ himself would have Bitcoin in his cold storage if he were around. But it seems like that whole Christian, I grew up as a Catholic, community is just so slow to adopt something that would seem such a great fit to them.
That's interesting that you observed that, because I observed quite the opposite. So I worked in traditional finance for 14 years. It's dominated by Jewish people, right? But once I came to the Bitcoin side, it's dominated by Christians. So And I had the same exact question that you had. And you know how it's biblical that God whispers to you? I was literally like in the shower, kind of God whispered to me like why I think there's a huge overlap between Christians and Bitcoiners. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, like Christianity, right? It takes a lot of willing to suspend your own disbelief to investigate for yourself. You hearing about Jesus for the first time is not going to make you an instant disciple.
Right.
It's like a cow that re-chews its cud. It's something that it needs to be investigated in time and time over and over and over and over again. Right? They say the Bible is a living word, and that as you read it, especially tailored towards your own life, it's going to have very specific meaning. Okay. So, yeah, because again, like, why would Jesus come down in humble human form? Like, why does he come down as like a 20-foot gorilla and just be like, hey, everybody shut up and listen to me? Right.
Right.
It doesn't make sense at the surface. Right.
Yeah.
But again, it's that willing to suspend disbelief, and hence Bitcoin are the same thing as well. Now, taking it to what I mentioned about the fourth turning, if you studied history as well, whoever owns the most amount of hardest financial asset will help rewrite the history of tomorrow. And so as Bitcoiners, I think Christian Bitcoiners, we have this disproportionate obligation to help other Christian Bitcoiners.
Yeah. Fantastic. I'm looking at the time. I'm like, I cannot believe it's already been an hour. I feel like we started this conversation like 5 minutes ago. Well, any closing remarks and we need to do this again, but any closing remarks for the Bitcoin community listening here?
Yeah, I just think that what you're doing here is great, that you have that you're doing the hardest part, which is the consistency part, right?
Yep.
I think, yeah, there's more people that need to be like you in the regards that you're willing to show up, and you don't have to do this. You're sitting on probably enough Bitcoin to not have to work, but we do this for the love of it. And so I just commend you. And for others who are on the sidelines who are Bitcoiners, just start creating content. I started creating content. Again, it was a whisper from God in late October. And it seemed to catch fire in the regards that a month later, the Wall Street Journal picked me up. But you never know, right? So just go put yourself out there. Don't think that you don't have anything good to say. You're a Bitcoiner in 2025. You got here with your own unique route. And in a world of AI, authenticity is the rarest commodity. So just go out there and do your thing.
Yeah. I love, I'll say a little bit about that, I think especially as men, we do need a mission.
Yes.
We need something that kind of drives us beyond our comfort zones. And I think it can be dangerous for Bitcoiners to just sit on their stack and say, I really don't need to work. And say, yeah, it's true. You might not need to work, but you need a purpose. You need a mission to bring out the best in you, something that makes you struggle and strive. Great book recommendation for anybody listening. Wild at Heart by John Eldredge was a really powerful book for me. And it goes into how man needs a battle to fight. And if not, he just becomes this kind of lazy warrior just sitting around doing nothing.
Yes, I love that you bring that up. But that's why Christians are made to make disciples. So wherever you are in life, that is always the goal, is how can we advance God's kingdom, right? That is a perpetual goal of true Christian disciples. So we always have something to work for.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing that Christian side of you, and I appreciate you coming on the show today. Let's do this. Let's do this again.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, have a great day. Thanks, Peter.
Bye.
All right. So that was Peter. I found him on X. If you're listening to me on Facebook or LinkedIn, you're a Parks and Rec guy or gal, you should definitely get on X. If Peter's on X Spaces, I spent a lot of time on X Spaces. There's a lot of great wisdom around there, and for the Bitcoin community, and it's really digestible. And it can get a little rowdy sometimes on these X Spaces, so you kind of have to have a tough skin. But there's a lot of super intelligent people that help kind of understand Bitcoin. And if you're a Bitcoin content creator or thinking about what can I do, there's so much to do in Bitcoin. But trust me, even if you want to just help out with your local Bitcoin meetup, all the Bitcoin meetups need help organizing. They need help in volunteering. Consider maybe even creating a little structure where you have a president, which we're getting ready to do. I talked to my local Bitcoin meetup. Shout out to Morgan who comes on the show. Talked to him on my ride back from Alabama. and we're gonna elect a president for 1 year and maybe a vice president. And so each year we'll talk. I mean, we'll talk about recruitment. We'll talk about, we're gonna maybe do some, maybe go to a BitDev meetup or something, and we are considering starting a student group here on LSU campus, which I'm pretty close to. And so if you're looking for something to do, I promise you it'll serve you well. When you have a mission, it's just something about bringing the best out of you. And I know a lot of Bitcoiners are kind of like just stacking sats, but that's kind of boring. And it doesn't really drive your spirit to excellence. And so I think that as AI takes all the jobs away from us, man's going to have he's going to be struggling to find out what's the meaning of life, what's his purpose when he no longer is a provider through, bringing value to the market, at a job. What else is his purpose? And at least I can speak for me. I get a lot of purpose from just going to my Bitcoin meetups, helping to organize those, helping to grow those, helping to get the word out, and just continuing to build. I'd like to think that 2025 is a year of building. We should be building. So for all you Bitcoiners out there that are listening, let's stop fighting the system and start building the new system. So I'll kind of close with that one. So Craig Leblanc, the doorman with the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, trying to do show 5 days a week for you guys, but just know I'm on the back end working with my Parks and Rec people who I love very dearly. Shout out to all my Parks and Rec people that are listening. Love you, and it's a pleasure to build a network for y'all doing 10 shows, 10 1-hour shows a week. And I've got a team of designers on the back end that's really starting to create something special. So appreciate y'all showing up here today and listen to us talk about Bitcoin. Now, remember, I am by no means the best Bitcoiner, podcaster, content creator. I'm hoping to just get you in the door some way. Listen to guys like Peter. He has some great content on X. There's so many great podcasters and YouTubers that are creating unbelievable, great content, far better than mine. And so I encourage you to seek those out. Shout out to Jeff Booth, who's another guy that I listen to, Lynn Alden, another girl that I read her book. And so lots of good stuff out there. I promise I'll be here all week. I've got a couple of shows coming up, and then I think me and Morgan are going to do another Thursday show. So appreciate y'all showing up tonight. I will see y'all tomorrow at 9 p.m. with the Bitcoin Daily Podcast. Love you guys. Bye. Oh, wait up. Hold on. I've got to play. This is just becoming a regular now, where I forget to queue up my outro that Chris made me, and he's one of my video editors that works for me full time. So I appreciate him doing that. And I'm signing off. See you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.
Welcome to the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, where knowledge meets financial freedom. We're here to break down the world of Bitcoin. No fluff, no hype. Just real talk about how this digital asset is reshaping the future of money. Inflation is stealing your purchasing power, but what if there was a way to fight back? Enter Bitcoin, the digital currency that empowers you to take control of your wealth. Ever wondered why your money doesn't stretch as far as it used to? At the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, we educate, inform, and inspire. From expert interviews to breaking news, we bring you everything you need to stay ahead in the Bitcoin community. Market updates, expert insights, real-world use cases, and practical tips to navigate the Bitcoin economy. So whether you're a seasoned Bitcoin investor or just getting started, this is your daily dose of Bitcoin wisdom. Don't miss out. Subscribe now, hit that bell icon, and let's break free from the chains of inflation, one Bitcoin at a time. The Daily Bitcoin Podcast, your gateway to financial freedom.